In this class, we will learn how can we do WCF instancing.
Okay, so that was that was my kid Sanjana. I wanted to say thanks via this video to my family, to my kids, because I think it takes a lot of deal, to while I'm recording the video, you guys are keeping your mouth shut, you're keeping patience, and I think we have crossed I don't know how many videos I've recorded in my house personally as well as in my office, but especially when I'm recording in my house, my family ensures that they don't shout on the mic, they don't speak. So completely out of respect to my kids and to my wife, this video goes to you. Now in this video what we'll do is basically we'll try to understand what is basically WCF instancing. No, now before we go ahead and we try to understand what is WCF instancing, let's try to understand what happens when WCF client sends a request to a WCF service. So the WCF client sends a request and on the WCF server a WCF instance is created of your WCF class. So in other words, if you remember that we had what you call an interface, a service contract, and that service contract was later implemented by a concrete class. So an object is created of that class, and that class basically serves a response to the client. So in other words, whenever a WCF client basically sends a request, an object is created, and that object basically responds back to the client. Now what is WCF instancing? WCF instancing is all about how to configure this instance. So in other words, how much instances do you want to create, how long they should be in the memory, do you want to manage states between the instances, etc., etc. So WCF instancing is all about how you want to configure that WCF object which is created to serve the request. Now there are three ways which WCF service has given to configure WCF instances. One is per call, per session, and single instance. So what we'll do in the further coming time is we'll take up one by one. Like we'll start with first from per call. We'll try to see that what basically is a per call. We'll see a sample code for that, and in the same way we'll do for the other two WCF instancing types. And later on, finally, what we'll do is we'll do a comparison of what to use when. So let's start with the first thing, that is the per call scenario. Now what happens when you configure your WCF service as per call, what happens? So here's your WCF client and here's your WCF server. So let's say that the client makes the first call, that is we'll term this as method call 1. A WCF instance is created, a response is sent to the WCF client, and then this instance is destroyed. Now when the same client, or must be any other client, makes a other method call, again one more instance is created for that method call, a response is sent, and this instance is again deleted from the memory. In other words, for every method call from the WCF client, one WCF instance is created, object is created, the request is served, and the object is destroyed. So per call means, as the name says, per call, number of objects will be directly proportional to the number of calls that the WCF client makes to the WCF server. So when you configure your WCF service as per call, for every call a WCF instance object is created. Now let's go and try to see the code, and let's see that how this actually looks practically. So here's our sample code. What we have done is that in this project we have created one simple WCF service, and this WCF service is consumed via a WinForm application. Now if you look into this WCF service, what we have is basically we have created a simple interface, a simple service contract with a method called as increment. Now this increment function basically returns back an integer. Now if you look at the implementation, what we have done is we have basically created a class level variable called as int counter. Now this counter will help us track that how many number of instances of WCF service has been created on the server. And the increment method is implemented in this class called as service1, wherein what we are doing is we are just incrementing the counter value. So we are just making counter is equal to counter plus 1, and then we are returning back the counter. Now let's go at the client side. Now this same WCF service is consumed at the client side, and at the client side what we are doing is we are just calling up the increment method. So you can see that basically I have created a simple message proxy object here, and I'm just calling the increment method twice. Now if the same instance is used to serve the request, then this counter will become, like 1, 2, 3, 4. So with every increment method call, this counter will increase the value. But if new instances are created for every method call, then this counter will always be 1. Okay. So this form1.cs, where basically we have called the increment method twice, in case if the same instance is used to serve the request, then I will get like 1 and 2. Okay, so I will get message box with value 1 and 2. But in case if the same instance is used, then basically I will get 1 and 1, always 1. Okay. Now in order to configure this WCF service as per call, what we need to do is we need to decorate our concrete class, that is service1 class over here, with the service behavior tag. So what you need to do is basically you need to go to your class, your WCF service class, and decorate it with the service behavior attribute, and over there you need to specify the instance context mode value. So you can see that over here I have specified the instance context mode as per call. Now if you do a dot, you will also see that there is per session, there is single, etc. So what we have done is basically we have configured now this WCF service as per call. Now let's go and build this application and let's run it. Now because this session is configured as per call, what should happen is I will always get the value as 1. So with every method hit on the Windows client button, I will always get the value as 1. Why? Because in per call what happens is basically for every request a new WCF instance object is created. So here I press the button 1. So let me just click on the button 1, and you can see that it is 1, 1 again. Now let me again click button 1, 1. So like for every method call a new WCF instance is created, and that's why we are always seeing the same value again and again. Now let's move ahead and let's try to understand per session. Now the next type of instancing type is a per session. In per session what happens is basically one WCF instance is created for every session that WCF client connects to the WCF service. So in other words, if you create a WCF service object on the WCF client, and if you make multiple method calls using that object, that single object, then only one instance will serve that. If you compare with the per call, where every method call was making one WCF instance, here one WCF instance will serve for the whole session of the WCF client. Remember that I'm saying here for the whole session, not for everyone. Okay. So in other words, let's say that you make a method call 1, then an object is created of WCF instance, it responds back. Now in the same session, if again the WCF client makes a method call 2, the same WCF instance will be created, it will be used to serve the WCF response. So in other words, one instance of WCF service will be running for a session of WCF client. Now what we'll do is let's go back to the project and configure the project as per session, and let's see that how does it look like. So I've taken the same project, and you can see that I have configured my instance context mode as per session. So you can see that basically it was per call first. Now at this moment I have configured it as per session. So let me just go and compile this project. So build solution, and let's go and just run this. Now what will happen is basically because for a single session only one WCF service instance will be created. So we should get the value as 1, 2 like this. Because why? For every method call the same instance will be served. So let's see. And just to note, at your client side we are making 2 method calls to the increment method. So we are making 2 calls to the increment method. So the first increment will make it 1, and the second increment call will make it 2. So we should get message box 1 first and then 2. So let me run this application. And here's our box and button 1. So let me click on that. So there's the value 1, and you can see the value 2. So in other words, for the same instance, for the same session, basically only one WCF service instance was created, and you can see the values are incremented with every method call. Now let's go and try to understand the third type of WCF instancing mode, that is single. Now the third way of configuring the WCF instancing is by specifying the instance mode as single instance. when you configure your WCF service as a single instance, you are creating one global WCF instance, and this one global WCF instance will serve calls across WCF clients, across method calls, etc. So in other words, only one global WCF instance will be created for all the method calls what is happening to this WCF service. So let's do one thing, let's go back to our project and configure our WCF service as single instance, and let's see that how the things work. So the same project, I have configured the instance context mode as single. So you can see that basically I have specified the context mode as single now. So let's build this application and let's run it. Now, as I've said that basically when we configure WCF instance as single, all the clients, throughout the method calls, only one global instance object is created. So let me press button 1. So you can see that basically it will pop up the message box 1 and 2. Now let me do one thing, let me just close this, and again I will start up my client. So I have again, now let's say that this is a fresh client who is connecting to the WCF service. So now the value of the counter will be now 3. Why? Because the WCF instance which served the first client request, it is still the same WCF instance. So you can say 3, 4. So in other words, every time you hit the button 1, the values will keep on incrementing because only one WCF instance is now serving all the method calls across the clients. Now what we'll do is we'll try to do a comparison between all these 3 kinds of WCF instancing, and we'll try to understand when should we use what. Now here's a simple slide which shows when to use what. Now the first important point which differentiates when to use what is the state of your WCF service. Now if you want your WCF service to be stateless, then definitely the way to go is per call. If you want your WCF service to be stateful between the sessions, then you will use per session. And if you want to share global data across your WCF clients and WCF services, in other words, you have a lot of WCF clients and you want to share some global data via WCF services, then the way to go is the third one, that is single instance. Now remember that if your WCF class, it's holding intensive resources like connection object or some kind of huge memory objects, then probably the best way is that you use per call. In other words, the request comes, that the huge intensive resource is created, the request is served, and the object is destroyed. So in that way, the intensive resource is not locked in a longer time in the memory. While in per session or in single, what happens is the resource gets locked for that particular time. So one of the points again to think about when to use per call and per session as single is that what kind of resources is your class holding. So if your class is holding huge resources, like connection objects or something, must be that per call is the best way to go. If you are looking for a scale out architecture, okay, then definitely per call is a way to go. Why? Because, okay, let me just explain what do you mean by scale out. Scale out means okay, here's what it is. For example, let's say that you have one server, okay, and it is serving some 100 requests, let's say. Okay, now for some reason what happens is tomorrow your request becomes more than 100 requests, more than, must be 500, 600 something. Now there are 2 ways to go about it. One is that you put up a new server, which is nothing but scaling out. The other one is that you scale up. In other words, you just add extra more powerful hardware to the same server. For example, you probably add more memory, or you add more RAM, more hard disk, more CPU power, etc. Now for a scale out architecture, what you do is basically you add new servers, okay, and you put a load balancer, etc. So in other words, your state of your application or your state which you basically store, the state should not be affiliated to a server. So that's why per call becomes a very good solution when it comes to scale out solutions. Okay, so in case if you are thinking about scaling out, then definitely per call is the way to go. Why? Because it is stateless. But in case you are thinking about scale up, then per session is the way to go. Now let's say the third very important thing when you can use what you call these configurations are, how is the threading model. In case if you want your WCF functions to be handled through a single threaded model, that is STA model or STA apartment, then probably per call is the way to go. Why? Because for every call a new instance is created, so you don't need to worry about threading and all those things. So these are like some of the points you can take care when you think about when to choose per call, when to choose per session or single. So I hope that this session was useful of WCF instancing. In the coming up session, we'll talk about WCF concurrency. WCF instancing and WCF concurrency, they basically go hand to hand. So in the next coming up session, we'll talk about WCF concurrency and how we can improve the throughput of your WCF services.